Hello everyone, Palumbo here. Before we start the video, you're innocent until proven guilty. Video we're doing today in the case of Madeleine McCann, we're gonna ask the question, how can David Payne be in two places at once, folks? In front of you, you have Fiona Payne, David Payne's wife, her first statement. Let's read it together. Fiona, yesterday, they slightly altered their routine. They went to the beach with the children and her mother Diane. They arrived there around 15:45 and left at 18:15. They headed towards the tennis courts until about 7 o'clock, 1900 hours. Immediately afterwards, the witness headed towards the apartment with her children and her mother. 10 minutes later, her husband David appeared in the apartment. Her mother, helped by husband David, bathed the children. So here you have Fiona, David Payne's wife, telling the detective that at 6:15 they left the beach heading towards the tennis courts, folks. Now immediately, if you look at the CCTV footage regards the pre-show restaurant, Fiona did not leave the restaurant down at the beach until around 20 to 7. She did not leave to go to the tennis courts at 18:15 like she says in her first statement. She then tells the detectives in her first statement that she stayed at the tennis courts until about 1900 hours, which is 7 o'clock, folks. She then tells the detective that afterwards she headed towards the apartment with her children and her mother being Diane Webster. 10 minutes later, her husband David appeared in the apartment. Her mother, helped by her husband David, bathed the children, folks. Now that is David Payne's wife, Fiona, telling the detective that she arrived in the apartment at 1900 hours, having been the beach, then the tennis courts, then back to the apartment. At 7:10, she's telling the detective that her husband David entered the apartment and her husband David bathed the children with her mother Diane Webster. So Diane Webster should corroborate what her daughter is saying. Here you have the statement, the first statement of Diane Webster, who is the mother of Fiona Payne and the mother-in-law of David Payne. Diane, concerning the day yesterday, she went to the beach with the children, her son-in-law and her daughter. They arrived there around 3:45 and left around 6:15 to go to the tennis courts, where she stayed until 7 o'clock. The informant then went to the apartment with the small children, and 10 minutes later her son-in-law David joined them. With her son-in-law's help, they bathed the children. So Diane Webster in her first statement corroborates Fiona's statement, her daughter's. They are the same, folks. Again, Diane Webster tells the detective that they left the beach restaurant at 6:15 to go to the tennis courts, And again, just like Fiona, if you look at the CCTV footage regards the pre-show restaurant, they did not leave that restaurant until 20 to 7. They did not leave that restaurant at 6:15. Again, Diane Webster tells the detective that she stayed at the tennis courts until 7 o'clock, just like her daughter. Diane Webster then tells the detective she went to the apartment, and again, just like her daughter, 10 minutes later, her son-in-law David joined them. With her son-in-law's help, they bathed the children. So you have two witnesses, Diane Webster, Fiona Payne, both telling the detective that they both entered the apartment at 7 o'clock, having been the tennis courts, and then at 7:10, 10 minutes after Diane and Fiona entered the apartment, David Payne entered the apartment at 7:10. So the question we're going to ask is, how is that possible, folks? When David Payne tells the detectives the following in his rogatory statement. Now, here's the rogatory statement of David Payne. Now, bearing in mind what I've just told you, that according to David Payne's mother-in-law and David Payne's wife, David Payne entered the apartment at 7:10, 10 minutes after his mother-in-law and his wife entered the apartment. His mother-in-law and his wife both state in statements that David Payne bathed the children. So here you have David Payne's rogatory statement. The detective, 1485. Okay, so you went back and then you played a game of tennis for about an hour. David replies, yeah. Now here's the crux of the matter, folks. 1485. The detective. David, you think you played from about 7 till 8 o'clock. David replies, yeah, it was before, we got back before 8 o'clock, so perhaps just before 7, just before 7, so it was just before 8 o'clock. So David Payne is telling the detective that he played tennis from 7 o'clock up until 8 o'clock for an hour, folks. Or he returned to the apartment just before 8 o'clock. Now that is totally different to that of his mother-in-law and his wife saying he was in the apartment at 7:10, folks. The question I am asking is, how is it possible for his mother-in-law and his wife to say he was in the apartment at 7:10 when David himself says he was playing tennis from 7 till 8 o'clock, and that's when he returned to the apartment? You see, you have other witnesses down at the tennis courts, folks, who could verify that David was playing tennis and he was not in the apartment at 7:10. That would be his friends, Matthew and Russell O'Brien, Jerry McCann, and the ones he played tennis with, who would be Julian Tottenham, Curtis Brain, I think his name is, or whatever his name is, and the tennis instructor himself, Dan Stuck. Now they could all verify that he was on the tennis courts from 7 o'clock till 8 o'clock. But none of them were asked, folks. We're just taking David Payne's word that he was on the tennis courts from 7 till 8 o'clock. Russell O'Brien and Matthew Oldfield were asked who was playing tennis, but the independent witnesses were never asked, and that it was Julian Tottenham, Curtis and Dan Stuck, folks. If you read Dan Stuck's statement, the tennis instructor, there's hardly anything in it with regards to who was playing tennis, apart from Jenny McCann. So anyway, that's the question for the day, folks. How can David Payne be in two places at once? When at 7:10 his mother-in-law and his wife said he was in the apartment bathing the children. And David himself says from 7 o'clock till 8 o'clock he was supposed to be playing tennis on the tennis courts. Makes you think.